Once upon a time, in a faraway land,
What are fairy stories?
The strange and wondrous place where nothing is as it seems.
Magic mirror on the wall. Who is the fairest?
Fairy is a perilous land.
Before she found herself falling down what seemed to be a very deep
It
well.
is the place you visit
A world
in your
of
dreams.
myth and magic.
when the clock began to
The
chime
evening
midnight,
star sailed down through the
A
sky.
mysterious voice began calling to the sad
She
princess.
pricked her finger with her needle. 3 drops of blood fell on the
In a
small
trance,
white
she
finger.
followed the haunting
And peered
sound
into
of
the
the
hollow
winding
tree.
stairway to the top of the
You
tower.
can read along with me in your book.
she waved her wand and said the magic words.
Let's begin now.
Well met, witches, and welcome to Storybook Witchcraft. Today we have with us Rose Aurora returning. And Rose, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure, and thank you so much for having me back. I had such a great time last time I was on the show talking all about Tolkien and nerding out about that, and I will definitely be nerding out again today on today's
Yay.
subject matter for sure. Hello out there in podcast land. I'm Rose, and I am a witch, a fairy seer. I'm also a trolldom practitioner. I was born into a Celtic lineage of witchcraft and fairy seership. I also studied with Johannes Gorbach, learning the Scandinavian trolldom tradition, and I'm a big horror fan. People who heard my last episode know that I'm a big Tolkien fan, but I'm also a huge horror enthusiast and nerd. And Clive Barker is my favorite horror author. So we're going to be, I'm going to be nerding out today.
Awesome. I'm so excited. Thank you for coming back to do this again. And on one of the platforms, I think it was Spotify, our last discussion was the most listened to episode. So
Wow.
I know
Oh,
people will
cool.
be excited that you are back.
That's so cool to hear. I love that.
I usually ask people to tell me about a work or story that was influential to their development, to their understanding of either the world or their craft. Today, this was a little different. I picked one that was influential to my budding understanding of the world as a young adolescent. So thank you for agreeing to discuss this.
Absolutely.
It was interesting to revisit it much later. And so we're talking about the Clive Barker novella Cabal and its film adaptation, The Nightbreed. I have a lot of thoughts. And so
Good.
I think maybe if this is cool with you, I was thinking maybe as opposed to like giving a quick synopsis or something, we can actually just work through the story a little beat by beat and talk about themes as they come up.
Sure.
We can save some of the surprise reveals till they come up in the story.
Yeah.
Great. And I think one of the things that I was most aware of rereading was that more so than like magic or the occult, although I think it's there. I think the novel was really about sexuality. And that was what I was picking up from it, especially considering the time it was written, really at the height of the AIDS crisis. But like Leo Martello argued that it's all one fight for liberty, whether it's witchcraft, feminism, queer. We're all the counterculture movement that is fighting for rights. Did you have any initial thoughts rereading this that came across?
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of stuff going through my mind throughout reading this. It was also a much later reread for me too, because when I first read this story, I think I was probably like 19 or 20, maybe. And I had also only seen Nightbreed like once, probably around the same time. And so I had not visited this either one in quite a long time. And I was really surprised by I mean, in a way surprised, but not, because I feel, Clive Barker, to me, his work is always, it's sort of it's like the ramblings of the mystic a little bit. You know what I mean? There's always something deeply esoteric about his work. And something that, whether or not, he, privately, maybe he identifies as an occultist or a witch or something, I don't know. But I do know that whatever he draws from in his inspiration is deeply mystical. And he's such a sage in the way that he is able to bring those very concepts that are difficult to express in words, in the mystic, in the imaginal, in the other world, those things that are really difficult to bring across in words, he somehow manages to do it, but in a way that still allows you to navigate it in your imaginal, to bring something of yourself. And that's something that I feel like he really has an edge over a lot of other, especially in the genre, or I guess I should say genres that he works in, because I also love his I love his novel Imagica, which is like not really a horror novel at all. It's like kind of pure fantasy, or surrealist fantasy, whatever. And he really has that edge over a lot of other authors in that he brings something to you, but also leaves enough room for you to bring yourself to it, I feel like. And he's just really good at that. And it's crazy because this is a novella and it's pretty short. But he manages to pack so much into it and just create this extremely visceral world. That especially if people have read Imagica, they'll know that is a quite long novel. And he does pack a ton into that one as well. But I find that Cabal is just as much on that visceral level as something like Imagica, a much longer and more detailed full-length novel. I also was really struck in rereading this in that I think this is one of the witchiest works of his. I think all of his works are very kind of witchy, but gosh, this one, it really kind of made me wonder, is he a witch? Or is he an occultist? I know there's something, he is tapping into something, but I've never scryed him, and I've never kind of tried to do readings on him or anything, just because there's a few artists in my life that I don't want to know too much about. You know what I mean? I don't want to peer too far into that, because it helps me to kind of immerse myself in just the art. And he's one of those people. And it's obvious. I mean, you get a sense reading his stuff, and even hearing him talk about when he's done his directing and writing movies and stuff too. You can tell he is tapping into something. But this one in particular really made me go, wow, maybe he actually is a bona fide witch, because this is just so. It really is kind of in that primal, especially if we're kind of, talking about the quote unquote traditional witchcraft type of stuff, shape shifting, transformation, the transcendence of being one with some sort of strange divine. Not to mention the obvious that he is kind of brought in the lore, the mythology of Baphomet. That's pretty obvious, but I mean, even the way that he interprets that, it's very Clive Barker, obviously, but it just speaks so much to an under the surface level understanding of a being like that, right? That's just kind of unknowable. And as we kind of get into the movie too, I think that's one of the places where the movie kind of falls short of the book. There's so many things in the book that lend themselves perfectly to the written word as opposed to visual. And then there's some stuff in the story that lends itself wonderfully to the cinema medium, like the monsters themselves. Yeah. I actually think it's best it's best to consume both. It's almost like I think they need to be paired together. Yeah. And what's interesting too is going from the book to the movie, if you go on Clive Barker's website, he has a whole bunch of subsections where you can read his thoughts about making the movies, nice. Writing his books, his artwork. He has all these. I mean, his website is a gem if people are interested in this artist. And he talks about how with Nightbreed, and he said even with Hellraiser, he has one way that he imagines things as he's writing his books, but then when he adapts it into film, he completely re-envisions it. He said, like, especially with Nightbreed, this does not look the way it looked in my head when I wrote the novella. It looks
that really
different.
surprises me.
Yeah, and I kind of was like, when I rewatched Nightbreed recently for this podcast, I was like, this does not feel like the book. I mean, this is cool, but like, it doesn't feel the way that I imagined a lot of this and it doesn't really even kind of line up with a lot of his descriptions, of even the locations and stuff like that. And then I went on his website to read through what he had to say about making that movie. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. He wanted to kind of completely reinvent the vision for cinema, which that makes sense, again, because a lot of the stuff in the book is hard to put into like an obvious physical visual medium. And I mean, some of that might be when it was made too, obviously it's cool that he went for, mainly practical effects and not a lot of computerized stuff, but some of those concepts in the book may lend themselves better to having a little digital edition, like Baphomet. The way he talks about that in the book is like really cool. But it's difficult to create with makeup, Yeah.
You mentioned Hellraiser. For people who aren't familiar with Cabal, short novella by Clive Barker, who is most well known probably for creating the Hellraiser series. Because of that, it was considered a horror novel, and maybe the novel is kind of horror. The film is definitely more dark fantasy, but also they both kind of defy description. There's some thriller, there's some horror, but they do have a lot of dark fantasy elements to them. It starts with a character named Aaron Boone, who is going through an unspecified mental condition, some type of neurodivergence. He has a psychiatrist named Decker, and he has a girlfriend named Lori, who apparently they've not been able to consummate their relationship. He hasn't been able to be intimate with her. What caught me right away was in the description of his meeting with Decker was that scene and Aaron's thoughts about Decker were way more intimate and physical than the way they talked about Lori in the beginning. So he's talking about seeing Decker across from him and the size of his build and the way his clothes are fitting. And later on, when they re-meet in another location, he says it was Decker's cologne he smelled, Decker's sweat he tasted in the air between them. So it's really erotic the way that their relationship is described, even though it's doctor and patient. I don't know if Decker has that eroticism about the relationship as well, but there is a weird dominance in the way he talks to Boone. And so it has sort of this like dominant and sub current going on, which I guess we could say Decker exploits, because he tells Boone that he believes that Boone has been committing murders, which have been described to him, Decker, through hypnosis sessions in their therapy. And Boone resists in the beginning, but ultimately he accepts that he did these things because he kind of believes himself a monster. If we extend this to like the eroticism between them, it could even be the guilt of the overculture conditioning sexual taboos. But he runs. Boone attempts to end his own life and steps in front of a moving vehicle. He's ultimately not successful in that and ends up in a hospital where he meets a character named Narcisse. Narcisse is waiting for messengers to take him away to a place called Midian, which Boone has heard of. Narcisse describes it as the place where monsters go.
It struck me as almost like an urban legend thing. Yeah, it almost struck me as like an urban legend type of thing. Like people know what Midian is, and it's sort of a thing that people say is a real place, but a lot of people probably brush it off as it's not.
Yeah.
Now, before I even go into that, I just wanted to touch on something you mentioned was the sort of eroticism. Which first of all, like that is definitely a staple of Clive's writing. Everything is very erotic, even when it's not sexual. It's or romantic even. It's so deeply erotic, and he's so good at kind of knowing and picking exactly what to tell you is going on in the scene, like with the senses to really like bring you into it. And I think that's one of the reasons this novella works on its own as like a short thing, is that he's so good at that, that even though it's only like, I think it's like less than 200 pages, right? So he just manages to immerse you so well by kind of knowing exactly what to put on the page to like make it sensual, basically, like and bring all the senses into it. It's really masterful writing. And one thing that you brought up was like how that interaction, the way it is kind of described, is kind of weirdly erotic, right? And how maybe Decker doesn't see it that way, but Boone has a kind of sensual description of it. But it's funny that you say that too, because then we see later when we find out that as, you know, spoiler here, like Decker is the real serial killer, right? But he pointedly talks about how he gets hard.
Yeah.
When he murders, right? And that's like a very like a specific thing that he says. It seems like he's almost maybe even asexual, if not murdering, right? He doesn't really seem to have a sexual interest except in killing.
Yeah. And in fact, at some point I think this was in the movie, at some point he describes his victims as breeders.
Yeah.
And that was just so interesting too. It's weird because he seems like the weaponization of like the overculture of normal society, except he's also thrashing out against it. It's funny enough, he's portraying a psychiatrist, but as if because he can't healthfully express these desires that he has, he's taking it out on everyone else.
Which making him specifically that occupation is really interesting. Like not just on the surface level of like, oh, he's secretly a murderer and, almost like the Dexter of it all. Like, oh, he's a blood splatter analyst, but he's also a murderer. Like, yeah, that's cool. But it's kind of interesting, especially with the general messaging of this novella of like, normal quote unquote people are not always good people. And as you say, like the overculture is not always the best option, for everyone and maybe not anyone if we think about it. But that's kind of an interesting occupation, especially to make him is something dealing with the mind and professionally dealing with the mind. And, not to get controversial, but as somebody who's deeply suspicious of the medical industry and psychiatry and, all of that, like that kind of spoke to me as well. And kind of noticing that subtle positioning of Decker, it makes a lot of sense to me.
In the next part so now we're in a hospital, Boone encounters a character named Narcisse, who's just kind of another vagrant, or is portrayed as like another transient. It's a really short scene, and there's so much here. So Narcisse is at the window, and he's expecting these messengers to come take him away to a place called Midian, and he's basically praying or calling to them, take me to Midian, take me to Midian. When Boone overhears this, because he's been dreaming of Midian and overheard rumors of its existence as well, he says, "What did you say?" And Narcisse snaps at him like, "You've scared them away. They won't come while you're here." And like he hears them go by, and it almost reminded me of like the night raids or a night ride. This, like the road that's going through this hospital, but he wasn't able to join because Boone was there. I saw this essay by Gail Rubin where she's talking about the politics of sexuality throughout history, and when she's talking about like the mid 1900s, this quote reminded me a lot of this scene in the novel, where she says, "Information on how to find, occupy, and live in marginal sexual worlds was also suppressed. Navigational guides are scarce and inaccurate. In the past, fragments of rumor, distorted gossip, and bad publicity were the most available clues to the location of underground erotic communities. And so Boone's only heard vague references to Midian, distorted fragments and stories, similar to how a queer underground would have been told through rumor and whispers.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked that parallel.
Yeah.
Also, Narcisse says that he has to prove that he's a monster to be able to go to Midian, which is very interesting. The play on his name comes up.
That is really interesting. Yeah, and that kind of plays into later, which I mean we'll get into this when we get to kind of that part. But when Boone's sort of his becoming, right, his becoming of a monster, and I definitely see that as like the initiatory event, right, the bite of the beast and all that. But it's interesting because I feel like especially people who find themselves drawn to the occult are going to recognize that with Narcisse, like that idea of like, I know this is something I need to touch. I need to know more. I need to be there. Like Narcisse wants to be in Midian, but there's something I have to do first. I have to prove to myself, or I have to prove to, a group or whatever that I belong here. The whole overarching kind of tones of counterculture and ostracization and whatnot. It's interesting how Narcisse kind of like he does the extremes, right? He does the extreme to show that he's a monster. Maybe not. It's not the same thing as the way that Boone eventually shows that he's a monster, quote unquote, too. But Narcisse has that hunger for something, right? And that's definitely something. Even though he is a smaller character, dialogue wise and whatnot in the novella compared to like Laurie or Boone, he's very representative of a lot of things that I think occultists will relate to.
He plays an important function too, because he does give the directions to Boone on how to get to Midian. Boone thinks he is a monster, so he also is drawn to this place that he hears is where the monster goes. Boone does find Midian. In the novel, it's a empty town with a nearby cemetery. In the film, it's just a large cemetery encircled by a wall, and he is attacked by creatures that we find out are the Nightbreed. One bites his chest, attempting to eat him. Boone does escape, but then Decker and the police who are hunting him for being a murderer end up shooting him. So he's fatally wounded. We should. You just mentioned the bite, so we probably should talk about that really really quick in this transmission. It leaves I think his other scars are healed at some point, but that one seems to remain, like sort of like the devil's mark.
Yeah, it's his witch mark for sure. I think too, before I yap about the bite itself and that moment, like one thing for me is like and obviously like we're kind of getting towards the part where Laurie plays a bigger part as well. But to me, overall, like Boone and Laurie to me represent two different types of witches. Like Boone is sort of the person to me who is born witched, right, and then has the initiatory experience that awakens that, what people might call the witch flame or the power, whereas Laurie to me represents the person who knows there is something different about them, but doesn't quite know what it is and is searching for something to get the answer to that. And maybe there is also the same way with Narcisse, like there's maybe a hunger within her that she doesn't quite recognize yet. And then she sees something that she can't unsee. That I find is a lot of times an initiatory event for people who are inclined to witchcraft, is that then they are introduced to something that makes them go, whoa, that's real. What is that? I need to know more about that. It's awakened something in me. And so I kind of love that they both are this couple that I see as like a representation of two different types of witches, or two different people who come to witchcraft in different ways. And as we said, like this initiatory moment where he gets the bite of the beast, right? The witch mark, like you said. it's the turning point to fulfilling his destiny, basically, right? Because then we find out that like there's an overarching kind of almost prophetic thing going on, but he's not even aware of it yet. He has just now stepped into the other world by getting this bite. And it's really cool that it actually is something like a physical mark, that's kind of placed on him. I definitely, it seems very werewolf-esque too.
Totally.
Obviously, like there's all these different types of Nightbreed in the book and in the movie where they all kind of are almost like Clive Barker's interpretation of various monstrous folkloric things, vampires, werewolves, witches, gods, etc. And devils, whatever. But this in particular feels very werewolf-esque. And actually especially in like Eastern Europe and stuff, there's a lot of werewolf lore that and in Ireland too, werewolf lore that kind of sets the werewolf up as type of heroic spiritual entity. At times, obviously, we all know the lore where they're just monstrous and scary and kill people and whatever. But there are in different places, at least in Europe, where there are some types of werewolves that are known to be sort of emissaries of good, or that kind of drive out the bad entities and things like that. So I feel like Boone especially kind of is getting that treatment a little bit, and especially as his arc progresses, he's almost like the good werewolf a little bit, right? So
totally,
it's kind of cool that it is a bite that awakens that in him. It awakens the witch flame, so to speak.
His death, as you mentioned, causes Laurie to seek answers, to find some closure. So she begins this journey. What's funny is, as fantastical as the novel and film are, on rereading it, realizing that it's Northern Canada.
I'm glad you said that, because I one thing I wanted to bring up that's just so random is like, why did he pick Canada for this in particular? Like, I mean, it's really funny because if people don't know, like Clive Barker's British, first of all, and he does have a lot of stuff that's set in the U.S. And some stuff in Europe, but like, why Canada in particular? I would really love somebody to ask Clive Barker that, because I just so random. It's so random. Why? Just why?
So Laurie is journeying through Northern Canada. She wants to see the area where Boone was found and killed, and which eventually will take her to Midian herself.
Which we should probably mention too, like he is killed by a hail of bullets. Like he's shot multiple times. So he's received this bite, but he's he's kind of lured into this, being surrounded by police just outside of the cemetery, and they shoot him full of bullets. So he is like dead.
Right. They think they're killing a serial killer, which of course is not true. In fact, in his encounter with the beast in Midian who bites him, named Pelican, the beast tells him, "I smell innocence on you. You've never killed anyone." And so Boone now knows that he's been lied to, or at least misinformed. But while Laurie is en route, or right before she leaves, that bite seems to activate, and Boone's body disappears from the morgue. It turns out he's no longer alive, but he's not exactly dead either. Like you said, this is basically Clive Barker's Vampires and Werewolves. I think at this point we do not see Boone for a while. He's he leaves the morgue, and we don't really know what's happened to him as of yet. Laurie ends up finding her way to Midian, and she comes across a creature, a small deer-like creature who seems sick. And a woman beckons from one of the mausoleums in the cemetery, asking Laurie to bring the creature to her. And it becomes obvious that, like Vampires and Werewolves, that it's because the sun is hurting the creature. As Laurie is returning the creature to the woman, the creature transforms back into a small girl, and they create a special bond.
I have to say, in the movie adaptation, I loved this part. The little creature is so cute. Little Babette's creature form in the movie, particularly, is it doesn't look like a deer. It kind of looks. It actually kind of reminded me a little bit of something from Brian Froud's artwork.
Totally,
A
yeah,
little
with
bit,
the eyes and
with
all,
the
yeah.
huge eyes, yeah, and it's kind of cute, but also a little creepy and just so cute to me. I was like, pick it up, take it back. But yeah, I actually love that part in the movie adaptation. It's great in the book too, but yeah, it was really cute, and I loved the little creature design.
And here we're sort of introduced to the Nightbreed for the first time. We only see a handful of them, but we're introduced to a character called Lylesburg, who in the book is described one way. I almost imagine him with like a top hat or something, but in the film, he always reminded me of like a Moses type character, a Charlton Heston style Moses. Although, and actually, and this is jumping around a little bit, but actually on reread, I kind of think Aaron is set up as a young Moses figure, and I think that's actually why they named him Aaron, which was Moses's brother or stepbrother. But he's set up as the Moses character who gets exiled to Midian, and then that would make Lylesburg sort of like the Jethro priest character.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you say that it's not quite how you imagine, like the movie version isn't quite how you imagine him, because that's not how I imagine him at all either. I imagine him more as like almost like a Paul Bettany type, like a really tall, skinny, British, like kind of sharp looking person. Almost maybe a little bit like snake-like in a way. I don't know. It's definitely different. And what's interesting is he's played in the movie by Doug Bradley, who is Pinhead.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but I didn't know this until after again, and I went and read some things on Clive's website. There was actually a quote from Doug Bradley on there talking about how he felt like he was maybe not the right casting for the role he did. He was like, I don't know, I'm not sure if I'm doing this like the right way. And then I guess apparently he was perturbed because they had dubbed his voice afterwards with someone else, and he was like not happy about that, which I wouldn't be either. And it's quite weird too, because he has such a distinct voice. But apparently there was a lot of studio meddling and a lot of nonsense, which we can get into later. But I think he was not too happy with how his part turned out. But yeah, it's funny because I don't really imagine him anything like that, the way he is in the movie when I'm reading the novella.
And it's weird too. There's so of course the place is named Midian, a biblical reference. So there's that story element, and with Aaron and Lylesburg, but then also Laurie and her travel to the underworld and literally underground at some point.
Yeah.
To retrieve Boone. So there's also this Orphic story, which is one of the, there's supposedly like 5 stories that all others are based on or something. And that's one of the main ones. So, but in this one, she would be Orpheus, which I think is a great twist as well. She's the one going down to retrieve her love from the underworld.
Clive Barker is actually really good at writing women too, I think.
Oh, like that's good.
I honestly think he's the best male author that I've read in writing female characters, because he doesn't, and maybe part of it is that he's a gay man, but like he doesn't overly sexualize, but they still have a sexual element to them that's like natural, you know? And especially as we kind of get into talking more about Laurie here, like she has a very sexual side of her, and what she ends up being sort of attracted to and magnetized to is obviously like very witchy and very sort of like the monstrous lover and things like that. So and I think, I don't know, he just really kind of nails it in writing that, and it's really beautiful and just I don't know, really fits that character so well. And it's interesting with her too, because when we first start like kind of reading her chapters that are focused on her, she's very she sees herself as like not looking the way she feels on the inside, where she talks about, people say I look sweet, or I don't want to be sweet. Like she literally says, I don't want to be sweet, I don't feel sweet. And that really kind of struck me at the very beginning of that whole section that's given to her, as I'm like, oh, that's interesting. There's something more to her. There's something, again, under the surface that is different, that is other. And she doesn't quite understand it yet. She doesn't even maybe realize that it's there fully, but it will be sort of triggered to awaken when she, again, journeys into the other world. Or the underworld, excuse me, but also the other world.
Yeah. That's such a great point. And because unlike some literary female characters, her whole persona isn't dissatisfaction.
It's not a trope.
No, it's not dissatisfaction and like her demeaning herself the whole time based on her looks. It's just part of the normal sexuality that you bring up. But she's also comfortable in her own skin. Then not portraying the inner her as accurately as she would like is such a reflection of Narcisse, who literally takes off his face to show his true self.
Yeah.
And as we see most of the Nightbreed, there's this element of body modification, like a lot of subcultures. There's a lot of body modification that we see when we start touring Midian. That is a really great point about her character. Because the novel's so short, they're not really that deep in a sense. So it's
but again, he knows exactly what to give you to give you the right, the right markers of this is what is going on in her inner world at times. She may look innocent, she may look normal, she may look, whatever, but this is what's in her inner workings. And I love that. Like, he didn't have to use, 300 pages, it worked just because he knew exactly what little markers to put out there that made us go, okay, there's more to this chick, there's something interesting going on here. And we definitely see it in her arc. So
yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, that's great. While she's in Midian, Lylesburg warns her not to tell anyone what she's seen. And this was just such a poignant line where she says, "Is that a threat?" And he says, "The danger isn't to you, it's to us." And she seems to agree. But as she's leaving, she is attacked by Decker, who has followed her there, which prompts, I'm kind of breezing through this, but it prompts Boone, who now we find out is in Midian, to leave the underground and come up to rescue her. And I actually think I jumped over a really important part that we might need to run back to, though. So I was thinking we hadn't seen him in a while, but there was a very important part that has happened in between there. Apparently, he has found his way back to Midian. He's been taken in by, reunited with Narcisse, who now has no face. And there is a whole initiation ceremony that happens where where Lylesburg welcomes him, again, very much like a high priest character, and describes their community as the tribes of the moon.
Really interesting way to describe them. Yeah, I love that. And I'm glad they kept that in for the film adaptation too. Again, it says a lot with very little, right? It kind of gives you everything you need to know, while still maintaining an interesting sense of like openness about what exactly are they, right? And especially in the book, I think I love how Clive manages to leave things, again, open enough to your interpretation. Even the way that he describes the way that these beings, the Nightbreed, transform is very, it almost made me visualize something kaleidoscopic, like all these sort of weird, like geometric things kind of moving and collapsing in on itself. And that's sort of how he describes how they shapeshift and transform. And which again is another thing that I feel like is really hard to translate into film. Especially in the 80s. I think this came out like 89 or something like that. But it's really beautiful, and it's especially if you have like a dense imagination, you can really kind of imagine some interesting things. That is the way that these beings, like bodies, sort of collapse in and move inside out to create new shapes, so they can go from animal to humanoid and all in between. It kind of is the ultimate body modification, as you were saying earlier, which they do show quite literally in the movie. You know, a lot of them have like piercings and tattoos and like, kind of healed wounds that remain open and things come out of them and things like that. So, which is cool. I mean, it's funny because watching the movie, I kept thinking the whole time, I'm like, this is like Clive Barker does Jim Henson. You know, like
it really is.
It's there's some moments that are just extremely Jim Henson like, with the creatures and everything. And it really doesn't come off that way, at least to me at all in the book that way. It's much more kind of abstract in the book, but for, you know, the medium of cinema, I think it worked to have it kind of be these really strange and kind of showing, they have literal body modifications on top of their natural otherness, right? Yeah. So, and Clive is so good at that kind of weaving counterculture stuff in, even with Hellraiser. Like he dead ass says, those are S&M outfits. Like that's what I base the Cenobites look on. It's like those are S&M outfits, you know. And he's just so unapologetic about the fringes and what people might consider outcasts or people misunderstood, you know, the counterculture. I mean, he's just really, really good about not being heavy-handed about it even. It just makes sense the way that he tends to write that and sort of even interweave that into his movies. So I love it.
And because it's not only their looks or their bodies that are monstrous, they're also monstrosized because of their interests and their practice is including eating human flesh or for some of them, maybe all of them,
which it seems to be not all of them that do that. It seems to be like there seems to be different types of Nightbreed. Obviously there definitely was in the movie. They all kind of looked different from each other, which was interesting. An interesting choice. To make them all literally look different. Yeah, right.
So there's all varieties in Midian, and this Tribes of the Moon. We almost get the idea that many of them are just the last remnants of various other tribes that used to exist, or various other species that used to exist. And sorry to keep doing this, but there's this quote from Foucault where he says, "An entire subrace was born, different despite certain kinship ties, from the libertines of the past. From the end of the 18th century to our own, they circulated through the pores of society. They were always hounded, but not always by laws, were often locked up, but not always in prisons, were sick perhaps, but scandalous, dangerous victims, prey to strange evil." But he's talking about people who are considered sexual deviants throughout history, and how it parallels these scenes that we see of the remnants of the Tribes of the Moon. And in fact, Laurie is given a vision of their past and how they were hunted and persecuted through crusades and inquisitions and all of that.
Yeah, he's really, especially in the movie adaptation, he is really point blank about it. like this was the witch trials, you know, this was the crusades, this was the Inquisition, you know, and that's quite interesting, especially as a character later comes into play, a priest, and what his inclinations are, and also what ends up happening with him, which I'm sure we'll get to soon. But it's a really interesting twist. But I like that, especially in the movie when we don't have the benefit of words and descriptions and things like that he kind of just put that right in your face of like, these are the people, these are the witches, these are the werewolves, these are the deviants, you know, that the church hunted, you know. And the visual was really striking. I mean, that's probably actually a really strong visual moment of the movie, is that sort of scene of them like torturing and burning and destroying the Nightbreed. It's really like striking visually. So yeah, it brought a tear to my eye. That's for sure. It was very sad.
In Boone's initiation, he has a sponsor who speaks for him. He's been schooled in the laws of the community. Again, this is very witchcraft initiation style. They're all arranged like a coven when he comes into the temple, and Lylesburg confides in him that that Midian was created by their supreme being, who is the Baphomet. And all of this, like kind of all of it, the persecution, the tribes of the moon, Baphomet, it gives me very Margaret Murray vibes. The witch cult that has survived literally subterraneously in this depiction.
Yeah.
And the horn deity that they still revere, and which normally that would be Baphomet. But I guess we'll jump back to that in a few moments. So,
there's a lot to say about that.
Yeah. So, Boone goes above ground to save Laurie from Decker. Unfortunately, Decker gets away, but Laurie is wounded. She's unconscious. He takes her back down underground into the actual community of Midian. However, Lylesburg exiles him for breaking the law and interfering with Laurie and the living and going above ground during daytime. Boone wants to appeal this exile, so he seeks out Baphomet for himself. Laurie, when she awakes, wants to find Boone, so she also descends to the temple to find Baphomet. And when she discovers Boone, he is there in front of the being, seemingly being like overwhelmed. I think he's gripping his head. He's receiving so much vision from Baphomet. But Baphomet is interesting because it's not the Levy description of him. He's in the novel, at least, he is dismembered limbs and a head that are just kind of rotating and floating around in a column of blue fire. And it's cold. That's the other thing. He makes sure to describe. Yeah, cold fire, and the room is supposed to be like freezing temperature and whatnot. And the closer Boone gets to Baphomet, he gets really, really cold. So, and this is super Orphic. So like So we have the god who's been torn apart, like Zagreus Dionysus, and we have the cold flame of the earth that is used in the underground initiation.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite parts of the novella, definitely. And again, I love any time that Clive Barker moves into this sort of transcendent horror stuff, where it's like, a becoming one with the monstrous, a becoming one with that sort of terrifying divine. And that's definitely, this is a perfect example of that. This scene, and not just Boone's sort of like freak out of like, oh God, too much. But Laurie's like witnessing of it and seeing the being herself, and just this, I forget how he exactly describes her feelings about it, but it's definitely, you can get a sense of like dread and also like fascination, and just almost like it seems Laurie's kind of getting hit with the like, I shouldn't be here type of vibe of, I should not be seeing this type of thing. And I love the description of Baphomet in the book. It's really, I wish I could paint well. I'm not a good like drawer or painter. I really wish I could, because I would love to like try to paint something of my imagination of that, because it's just really cool. And I think he describes some weird colors and things like that too, and almost like the blue flame changes color or something, if I'm remembering correctly. And it's a really cool moment, and very, very witchy, very witchy moment, very sort of transcendent moments for both the characters. I love it. And it is kind of a shame that the movie, I like the way it looked in the movie, but at the same time I was like, you did that with the book, and this is the best we could do. Like, come on, man, this is kind of like phoning it in a little bit. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they spent too much money on all the creatures and were like, throw the Baphomet together. I don't know. It was cool. It was cool looking, but at the same time, it's just like, damn, that was a really cool thing in the book. But again, maybe it's just like the technology wasn't there in that time, or whatever, because now I feel like, even though I don't love CGI, and I certainly don't love when it's overused, I feel like something like that, a little digital effects could be really impactful with something like that, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
I would love to see Cabal done as like a TV series.
Totally.
I think it would lend itself really well to that, especially if they were able to kind of flesh out some of the side characters and like their backstories a little bit, learn a little more about Lylesburg, about Baphomet. You know, like we could still keep the mystery in some things, but even just like a one season like thing, I think would be really good for Cabal.
And I think that's why I like pairing the film and the novel. The novel really gives us the main characters, Laurie, Decker, Boone.
Yeah.
But then the film begins to flesh out, or at least show us, the variety of the Nightbreed themselves, way more than the novel does. So I appreciate that. So Laurie does recover Boone from the Temple of Baphomet, and then they are exiled together. Because Decker lived, he decides to go to a local town and start up a witch hunt, because there's something not right, unnatural, that is going on up there in Midian. So the police get involved, the local town people all start pulling out their rifles and red caps, and he sends a priest along as well, who, interestingly, I think in the novel it's implied that the sheriff was sleeping with the priest, but I'm not.
They don't say exactly. It is I at least I don't remember they say, but he just seems to know the priest's secret, which is that he likes to wear pretty underwear under his priest outfit. He likes to dress up.
Right.
And he holds that over the priest's head. But how does he know that?
Exactly.
That's interesting.
Exactly.
Because how would you know that unless you're undressing the guy, right? I mean, did he walk in on him one day and go, "Oh, you're wearing like pretty panties," or was he undressing the priest? You know, I mean, kind of interesting.
Yeah. So I think they may have had they may be having relations. We don't know. Of course, that wouldn't be uncommon. But
it would not.
So the mob gets sent over to Midian. We do witness the first horrific, killing of one of the Nightbreed. They pull out a character. He is named in the novel. In the film, he's just a twink, basically. That's like he's a monster because he's a twink, I guess.
A twink with a dog.
Yeah, a twink with a cute puppy. And it's brutal in the novel. It shows like it just comes across like a bashing, but then also again, because of the time it's written, it's like a 60-second metaphor for the full AIDS crisis, where the main culture was looking the other way while people were dying. So it's pretty horrific. Interestingly, the priest at this point is kind of sympathetic. He's not part of the mob. He's telling everybody that the Nightbreed are also children of God, and he's curious to go down and learn more about them.
Yeah, he's an interesting character. I actually really like that character in the novella. He's so barely there in the movie, it seems like, which, I mean, they still kind of get but they don't have even anything about his secret in the movie at all.
No.
I think at one point he's called like the F slur, but other than that, there's no kind of like by the sheriff. But I don't think other than that, there's like any sort of indication that he's quote unquote different, in any way other than just not being part of the mob.
Right.
Which I have a feeling, based on, again, the stuff that I read Clive Barker talking about and how much the studio meddled, and was really kind of, he made it sound like this, and this wouldn't surprise me at all that if this is true, like that the studio was really kind of grossed out by this movie.
Yeah.
And just didn't know what the fuck to do with it. He talked a lot about how disturbed he was when somebody from the studio said to him, like, "You have to be careful or people are going to like these monsters." And Clive Barker was like, "Way to miss the point. Like, that is the point of the movie. You are supposed to sympathize with the monsters." Like, So I have a feeling that's probably studio meddling. Is just don't make any weird stuff about the priest, which is hilarious because that's a huge part of that character. Is he has this secret that's being held over his head because he doesn't even want to go to Midian at first. He doesn't. He's like, this is ridiculous. I'm not doing this. And you almost get a sense he's like a skeptic priest. That he kind of, in fact, in the movie, he flat out says when they're on the way to Midian, like, I don't believe in the devil. And you're like, interesting that the priest says that. But he's kind of that same vibe in the novella. And the sheriff is basically holding the secret over his head to make him come, and just be there basically in case they need, a holy man or whatever. But he's a really interesting character. I like him a lot in the story.
Decker is able to set Boone up again by killing everybody in the hotel where Laurie and Boone are staying. So when the police arrive, because Decker tips them off that there's been another series of murders, they're able to capture Boone. Laurie gets away. But Boone delays because with the scent of blood, it overcomes his Nightbreed otherness, and he begins in the film like tasting their blood. In the novel, I think he is eating their flesh. And they
are already dead, though.
They are dead. Yeah. They've all been murdered. Yeah. They've all been murdered.
Oh dear. What does that mean? Whoa. What is that fate? But yeah, he doesn't kill them. I think in the movie he was just kind of drinking the blood, but in the book he's like trying to eat their flesh. So, and she sees it. That's another thing too, is that's kind of a pivotal moment. She does see it and she's like, whoa. Oh boy. And she can't get him to stop. That's the other thing. Right. She's trying to get him to escape and she's like, come on. He's fully in a trance basically of just like, hunger or whatever. So,
and this kind of sets up, because as we'd heard about earlier, he had never actually killed anyone, but this sets up seemingly an internal crisis for him now, because now again, he thinks he is a monster. He talks about how he could still taste the flesh, and when he's regained his composure, he's a little, I guess, disgusted or feeling guilty about it. So it sets up this conflict for himself, but also enlarges our perspective about, one, we already know that he's not really alive, but two, that he can never go back. Now that he's been to Midian, he can never truly rejoin society. And
he knows that now.
Yeah. And there's something I really like about this. There's the trend to say monsters or villains, they're just misunderstood. And in some sense, yes, but in another sense, they are monsters. And I don't mean that pejoratively. I mean, I think that's a power, right? Like, so the fear that other people are feeling, some of it is unfounded, but some of it is because they're fearing an actual power. And
what could be a threat.
Exactly. And it makes me think about our work with spirits, but even before getting to that, the witch herself, who, as opposed to, it's again popular to say she was just a misunderstood herbalist, but at the same time, everybody knew about herbs. So there might have been that, but the actual witch who was outside of society, partially because she's been ostracized, but also partially by choice, maybe, or because that power requires the separation from society. There's something very powerful about that, about the fear, about the isolation, and about the fact that you can never actually be reintroduced into society completely.
Yeah, it's sort of speaking to a liminal state, right? Before he enters that moment, Boone, maybe he could try, he's in that liminal state of like, well, I'm this undead, whatever I am, I'm the Nightbreed, but he hasn't quite committed any sort of act that, polite society would ostracize him for at this point. But now he has, and he's done it in front of, his girl. So, and her reactions to it and the evolution of her feelings about all this is really interesting, and I'd love to get into that as we kind of move towards that. But it's I think also it again with Boone, I think he embodies that archetype of the born witch who has not quite yet awakened to the full power yet until that initiatory moment, and then the full almost confirmation, right? Act of like, yeah, okay, he ate the flesh, or he's fully embodied this monstrous quote unquote other now. And so and his feelings around it, he's accepted it, but he's not happy about it. and there's definitely that element too in the novel where he can't help himself. Like she can't get him to leave, even though the police are there, because he can't stop eating. And so to me, he represents this sort of inherent nature of the witch that is something other, and what, again, polite society would deem monstrous in some way, even if it's just, again, not that she has or he has committed some sort of evil act. It's that there is the threat that they could. That's the whole thing is if we're talking about like malefic magic, even there's plenty of people who can do malefic magic. They just don't, or they do it very, very rarely, right? If it's absolutely necessary. But polite society, again, is going to point the finger at that and go, you could really hurt somebody. So, you have to go away, or you have to, be destroyed. Again, this is such a short novel, but it's it has so much packed into it with this especially again for somebody who practices magic, for the witch, it's really packed with these kind of deep symbols and deep kind of social commentaries, which of course one could argue, well, Clive being a gay man, and again, this is kind of coming out right around the AIDS crisis. Like, yeah, it could be a message, sort of that, but wrapped in this fantasy aspect. But I think it's like you said at the beginning of this chat, it's all connected. And sexuality is an inherent part of witchcraft and the witch. Right. Even it's not even that she needs to be sexually active. I say she when I say witch, but I mean any gender can be a witch, obviously. But it's not even that she has to be sexually active. It's that the act of creation, the act of magic, and the acts of the witch are sensual and come from that deep primal place that is the same place that sex comes from, right? The sexual energy in people and in creation and in nature. And that is very frightening to the sort of the average person a lot of times. And especially if it is something that's coming from a feminine or female place. We all know that people have a lot of weird hangups around female sexuality and things like that. So it's an inherent part of the witch, and as an archetype, and witchcraft itself, and sexuality is, of course, also a type of hunger, right? So this even just this scene that we're talking about here of him eating flesh could be seen as untamed sexuality in a way. As sort of a symbol of that, however you want to kind of see it, because obviously, again, Clive's works are really kind of packed with symbolism, and especially this book, I feel like, is really, really packed with it. So, it's a real juicy scene. It's a really kind of interesting one to dig into and unpack it,
Yeah, hearing you talk about the hunger and his compulsion, how he can't stop, even when she's trying to stop him. It actually makes me think about my own experience, and I think this is probably common with a lot of longtime practicing witches, where I've stopped the craft for a while. I've cleared off my altars, put everything in a box, whether it was because of various life changes or whatever. But and at one point I was even like, nah, maybe why can't I just focus on like being interested in making money like everybody else is, and things like that. And then it didn't last very long because it's compulsory. It's part of, I think, how the witch needs to survive.
Yeah, and it's going to be an inherent part of how the witch relates to the world, not just the spirit world, but the physical world too. It is going to pop up. It is going to, whether the witch likes it or not. It's going to happen, and it's inevitable. That's this scene is definitely kind of a good metaphor for that, for sure.
I think we end up back at Midian then because of this, because well, actually, you were speaking about the trajectory of then his relationship with Laurie. So after after this scene where he consumes the flesh, he is captured, he's imprisoned. She ends up coming to him in prison, and they're actually able to initiate a sexual relationship now for the first time. Her having
big moment in the story. Yeah.
And it seems almost like, what is Clive Barker doing here? This is not the time for this. They're trying to escape the cops, but she's seen his monstrousness. She's also in ways it's been described, been exposed to the Nightbreed as like a smoke and a dust and things like that. So she's has some of that within herself as well. And they, now it's like they're free of their taboos in a sense or something.
Yeah, and now she's hungry for the monstrous. That's the thing that really stuck out to me hardcore in this scene, particularly, is her inner dialogue, but also what she says to him. And she literally kind of forces him to forgive himself. That's a big part of that scene too. A really pivotal moment is she's like, no, if anything moves forward, you have to forgive yourself now. And he submits to it. I mean, it's kind of gorgeous, like the way that his reaction is not to argue against her and to kind of go. He fully submits to it and says, "Yeah, you know what? Okay, I do, and also I love you for loving me." Basically, like he doesn't say that, but you can read it in that subtext of like the way then the sex unfolds. Basically, is that she's having this inner dialogue and saying some things to him that show you, oh, she likes this. This is what she's now like. She loved him before, but now she's fully in. Like she is mad for this guy now because of his monstrous elements, and she like doesn't even have an issue with it. Really, it seems like her any sort of hesitance she had about his monstrousness kind of went away really fast, and she was just like, you know what, I love this. I love you. I love this. And again, now she has seen something she can't unsee. And her reaction to it is to be magnetized to it, not to shun it or to run away from it in fear. It's that she falls more deeply in love with him because of it. And that's like, I'm a little bit of a sap, I'm not gonna lie, especially when it's like something like this, where it's sort of like the monstrous, the love the unloved kind of thing. A great show for this is for people who are looking for more stuff like this is Penny Dreadful. That's another one where, I mean, the whole kind of theme of it is very similar to this book, actually, where it's like love the unloved. And it's just, I don't know. I loved this scene. It's really weird. Yeah. I mean, it is a little strange. They're doing it in like a prison cell, basically, with Narcisse outside the door going, "Can you guys hurry this up?" So funny. But it's really beautifully written. It's really beautifully written. And it's just, it's not even like a super like long drawn out scene or anything. No. It's just kind of, it happens pretty quickly, but it's just really beautifully written. And it's kind of sad that in the movie that they just kiss and Narcisse goes, "All right, we gotta go." And it's like, all right, I get that it's like, they probably had more limitations on stuff. But again, this is something I feel like would lend itself well to like a series that's on maybe something like a Showtime or an HBO or whatever, where they can kind of, not for the sake of, titillation, but because it's very beautiful. And like, again, that love the unloved moment where, and again, knowing that their history was that they weren't able to make love before because of, his the stuff that he was going through mentally and whatnot. And she was always very patient with him too. That was the other thing, is she was like, "I don't care, that's fine. Like, I love you anyway." And that's even from the beginning, before he becomes fully awakened in his true monstrousness, she's accepting of him. She's fully accepting of him. And it's actually really beautiful love story that's kind of going on here with the two of them.
It is. And it's so interesting how you mention her desire for him, her hunger for him, because then it parallels the hunger that his hunger that she's forcing him to forgive himself for. That is beautiful. And they are able to escape the prison. They join the battle at Midian, which is all sorts of chaos. It's really hard to describe, but basically, I think it comes down to Midian is being destroyed by the mob. Unfortunately, the Nightbreed, many of them are killed. And there is, of course, a final confrontation between Decker and Boone. Boone is able, I think Boone is able to stop Decker. And interestingly, I did hear Clive Barker say that one of his inspirations for the novel was this was in the 80s. Slashers had just been really big, and what would happen if you put Victorian monsters like werewolves and vampires in the same story as an 80s slasher. So so it's kind of fun when you finally get that final confrontation.
Which, and for people who haven't seen Nightbreed yet, Decker is played by David Cronenberg, which is a really interesting casting choice. Like, it's very, amazing. Very interesting. And it's definitely, again, it's not how I pictured him in the book. No,
it's not how he's described at all.
Not at all. And it's almost kind of funny how Cronenberg's very, he's almost giving like Hammer film villain a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, he's almost kind of giving a sense of like corniness at times that I'm loving in the movie. It's very it gives me like almost Hammer films or like Vincent Price a little bit at times with his performance. And it's interesting. I never would have thought of him like as the casting choice. Again, while reading it, he's totally different. He seems almost very like, he seems so mediocre in the book. Not like the writing is mediocre, but like as a character, he's just this guy that happens to be an asshole. Like he happens to be this like jerk serial killer. And I guess like that's probably the point with him, because at one point, I think it might be Boone who asks him like, "Why do you do this?" And he's like, "I just like it. I like killing people. I just like hurting people." So that's kind of his whole personality, is just he has this inner thing going on, but on the outside he's very milquetoast. He likely, like, we never know his real name, even like he likely has no personality, because even Decker is the persona that he's stolen from someone he's killed. He's just kind of a blank canvas in a way. Because Midian is falling, Boone makes his way back down to Baphomet again, and they experience something like a divine union, or like the OTO would say, like a knowledge and conversion. And it's once again completely erotic in the way it's written in the novel. And so Boone, I believe, is like levitated into the cold blue fire, and even though it's cold, he's warm and he's erect, and I think he's nude. He's erect and he's facing the dismembered face of the god, and he orgasms and so intensely that it reaches the face of the god, and the god in turn bestows a new name on him, which is Cabal, and tells him that Cabal is now tasked with protecting Baphomet from his enemies, recovering his pieces that are going to be scattered because Midian is destroyed, and to find a new place to create a new community. And this was not the ending I would have expected. And at the same time, I really love it for multiple reasons. But I'm going to go ahead and take a break, because I'm sure there's lots of things you want to talk about. Again, Clive is a master at this kind of like transcendent horror. These unions with the divine that is strange and somewhat grotesque, and definitely erotic, and definitely just kind of tickles the senses, in the way that he writes it. And again, never seems, at least to me, and maybe it's just because I like weird shit, but like it never feels, it never feels shocking. It never feels like heavy-handed. It never feels like, oh, this is just to like make you feel titillated or just make you feel shocked. Like, no, it's.
I mean,
really
it was not
beautiful.
pornographic at all,
No,
and
not at all.
it wasn't even that. It wasn't even that explicitly described, and which is why I'm saying, like, I think he's nude. It's not.
Yeah, you really don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just beautifully written, and again, it's interesting to think about if you think about the the Baphomet in this story is sort of dismembered parts, right? And then you think about the kind of Levi picture of the Baphomet that we all know with the different parts, right? It kind of puts a new spin on that, right? That, oh, maybe that's actually not just a being that has all these different aspects inherently. Maybe it was pulled apart and put back together,
Wow.
with different things. That's an interesting way to look at that. And I mean, again, I would have never thought of that, but Clive did and made it really interesting. So it's another really, really cool moment in the story. And it's kind of happening amidst all this chaos, and we find out that he now has this he's reborn, right? He's reborn again with this sort of higher calling and this task set out by the divine that he has to do. And I don't know, it's just really it's really interesting how he manages to bring all these things together. And again, it's not a long drawn out scene, and it's not every little thing is described in a way that makes perfect sense. It's left up to you to kind of figure out what actually is happening here. And, oh, okay, he's getting a rebirth, and he's a union with this being. And is he going to die? I mean, that's another thing too, is there's a moment in there where it almost seems like he's going to die just from being sort of fused with this being.
Right.
I couldn't remember, because again, it was so long since I had read it that I didn't remember. Does he die at the end? And no, he comes out of it reborn. So he's going through all kinds of initiatory processes here, which is happening so quickly too,
We talked about how he's sort of a Moses figure in this, and interesting that he's renamed Cabal, the root of the word Kabbalah. So this transmission or reception, and what I think I really loved about this scene, the more I thought about it, was the accusations of the witches' Sabbath, where they always included illicit sex, and usually with a goat god or horned being, but also specifically the Baphomet, with the Knights Templar were accused of performing illicit acts, including cannibalism, in worship of Baphomet. And here we see there is this sexual act, but it's not illicit, it's sacred.
Yeah.
That is so Clive Barker, than to say when it was sexual and it was completely sacred.
Yeah. On his website, in the section about Nightbreed, he does talk about the Knights Templar. He talks about how he studied that, and how there's kind of like the unknown origin of where actually does Baphomet come from, and who is it, and all this kind of like up in the air stuff that we don't quite know historically. And so he's definitely done his research. He knows what's up.
Yeah, of course. The remaining Nightbreed are scattered to the winds. Some of them literally fly away, and take to the skies. And it is going to be Boone's quest now to recover the various pieces of Baphomet that have gone with the various Nightbreed, to reconstitute them and to establish a new community. He tells Laurie he has to go on this quest alone. And she sacrifices herself in order to force him to turn her, to make her immortal, or at least undead like himself, which he does. And so now we have this monstrous power couple who are off to establish the new tribes of the moon.
Yeah, there's actually a little passage from Laurie's perspective that, if you don't mind, I'd love to read it real
Please
quick.
do.
So this is towards the end. This is actually before. This is kind of right before the battle actually happens, but I think this kind of sums her up, especially as kind of a witch archetype. Okay. Nothing in the chambers had been as agonizing as what she'd confronted in the burned out building. The loneliness of Cheryl's body, the stench of creeping decay, the inevitability of it all. Against that, the monsters of Midian, transforming, rearranging, ambassadors of tomorrow's flesh and reminders of yesterday's, seemed full of possibilities. Weren't there among those creatures faculties she envied? The power to fly, to be transformed, to know the condition of beasts, to defy death? All that she'd coveted or envied in others of her species now seemed valueless. Dreams of the perfected anatomy, the soap opera face, the centerfold body, had distracted her with promises of true happiness. Empty promises. Flesh could not keep its glamour or eyes their sheen. They would go to nothing soon. But the monsters were forever, part of her forbidden self, her dark, transforming midnight self. She longed to be numbered among them. I screenshotted, or not screenshotted, I took a picture of that when I was reading it because that just was so perfect to me. That whole little paragraph there, and her inner dialogue, and how she sees these beings and what they stir in her. It's so perfect. Her transforming dark midnight self. I mean, that's so the witch, right?
Right.
That's so perfect. It's just so beautiful, and I love her arc. I love that. I love that she's. I think some people who maybe aren't on that kind of wavelength might be like, well, why is she killing herself for this guy? No, she's not. She's not killing herself for Boone. She's killing herself for what she knows she could be. She's like, if I can't be that, I don't even want to stick around because it's just, why bother with this other bullshit anymore? I want that. I want the monstrous. I want my dark midnight self. So yeah, it's pretty dramatic too. I mean, she's just like, forget it. I'm not going back to normal stuff. It's either this or I'm gone. And but she does get her bite, and she gets to transform. So
I love that, the dark midnight self.
Beautiful passage. I love it.
That is. And because we can't hear her interior dialogue in the film, that's adapted into the scene with her and one of the Nightbreed, who says, you call us monsters, but when you dream to be like us, to be able to fly, to be able to transform. And it's almost an accusation. Mm-hmm. In the way I've been retelling the story, because it begins with Aaron Boone, and he's sort of the catalyst of why all these things happen. It sounds very much like I'm talking about his hero story, but it really is Laurie's heroine's story. Yeah. Again, as this Orphic figure who goes down into the underworld, and then as you say, eventually isn't transformed to reflect who she really is. She doesn't want to be seen as sweet. She wants to embody her authentic self. Yeah.
Well, and in the book too, and I mean, to some degree in the movie adaptation, but definitely in the book, she is a very active character. She decides, I'm going to go here. Something's not quite right with this. I'm going to check out this Midian thing. At one point too, she meets up with this other lady. They go to Midian, then they come back. Yeah. The friend goes off and is hooking up with a guy, I guess, and then she goes back to Midian, and she's very active. She's very strong, independent, type of chick. So she makes all her own decisions too. That's the other thing in this. She's not swayed by other people's expectations, not even Boone's, because even Boone is like, I want to keep you safe. Like, you need to not do this and that. Yeah. And she's like, no, we're not doing that. I'm here.
Yeah, she's the main character of the novel. I would say. To be honest, yeah. In the film, it's more 50-50, but the novel, again, you're introduced to Boone first, but the majority of the novel is her. She really is the main character of it.
Yeah, it's an interesting difference too between the book and the movie. Boone's personality, I feel, is quite different in between those. In the book, he's much more fragile. he's really fragile,
Yes.
actually. And there's even parts where Laurie's talking about how many times she's kind of had to pull him from the precipice, basically, and just complete doom and darkness, and kind of and how many times he's cried in her arms and things like that, and just kind of given up or wanted to give up so many times, and she pulls him from that precipice and is patient with him, and again, I mean, right there we're seeing the neurodivergent aspect of that character, which we really don't see at all in the movie. I feel like we barely get anything in that respect. He seems much too traditionally masculine almost in the movie, and which again, it makes me, because knowing how Clive writes and how he wrote that character, it seems like I would imagine that's also probably studio meddling. But he's much more he's much more emotional. He's much more fragile in the book, and I actually really like that about him. I think that also gives him more of an arc, to kind of come into his own.
Yeah, he's kind of, I almost want to say like nonchalant in the film. He's very 80s cool.
Yeah, and it doesn't quite work, I don't think.
But, I almost actually messaged you shortly after beginning to reread the novel, how glad I was, unexpectedly even, to reread it, just because of that aspect of his character and his internal crisis, with his mental condition in the beginning, and as someone who goes through deep periods of low and sometimes seeks medication and things like that as well, it was cathartic actually to jump into the novel with that as the beginning, and then it went off into other things, and then I was just captivated into the novel, but it was so easy, one, to identify with that crisis, but two, really cathartic actually to read about the experience of someone else in the beginning of the novel.
Yeah, it also actually makes Decker more sinister too, because he knows this guy is fragile. He knows this guy is struggling hardcore, and he completely takes advantage of that by, framing him, sending him into a whole new crisis in the mind of, oh my God, I'm all of this and I'm a killer and I didn't even know. Oh my God. I mean, it's actually really horrible treatment of somebody, especially from such a vulnerable relationship of the therapist and the patient. I mean, that's just really sinister.
Yeah, the first couple chapters are sad actually, and
they're very sad.
I actually kept wishing I was new to the story, because I wondered what it would be like to be reading those and actually thinking like he does, that he is the killer, until the surprise reveal about Decker. So I was kind of wishing like, I wish I didn't know what was going on already. But,
it's a bleak tone at the beginning too, and it's funny because it erupts into such sort of grand fantasy too, that it kind of surprises you when it does kind of change gears a little bit, and it does it in a really smooth transitional way, like really, really well done. It doesn't feel abrupt and obnoxious. It feels nice, but it's very bleak at the right at the beginning. I think the first chapter, the first scene is literally Decker telling him like, hey, you're a killer.
One of the aspects of monster theory, it brings up how the word monster even comes from the same root as like monstrum, to demonstrate. So the monster is something that shows us a reflection of society, right? Mm-hmm. And it's so perfect actually then that Decker uses Boone for this, because it's his scapegoat for all his own crimes. Just the way that then we see like society is doing that to the monsters overall, to Midian overall. We see like the sheriff, the priest, the community is really not that, not truly that much more sane or boring than the monsters in Midian, but they refuse to accept it, right? So they scapegoat it all onto the monsters.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the mob doesn't even kind of question why they're doing it at first. Like some of the guys are like, oh yeah, like they grab their guns first, and then they're like, oh wait, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing this? So, and they don't really get a specific answer, I don't think. I think the
No.
sheriff just kind of says like, oh, there's some monsters. And they're just like, okay, cocking their gun. So, it's a really good commentary on that kind of scapegoating and, again, ostracizing people and the other, and the monstrous other. It's just a really good kind of commentary on that. In such a short amount of time, in a short amount of pages. It's pretty awesome. Again, though, I think it would lend itself really well to a TV series and kind of digging into some of the side characters and stuff. Narcisse is really interesting too. Like he's definitely, again, he's different in the movie versus the book. But yeah, in the book he's a little more somber. In the movie he's a little jester-like almost. Yeah, he's a little wacky, which I didn't mind. I think it was kind of a fun change. But he's an interesting character, and he sacrifices himself for Laurie.
He does. And when Laurie and Narcisse first encounter each other in the cemetery, Narcisse is on top of Laurie, and you don't actually know if he's going to assault her or not. You never know.
Yeah.
Like, again, they are monsters.
Yeah.
And I really like that ambiguity too, because then they end up becoming friends, basically.
Mm-hmm.
They do, but you don't know what his initial monstrous impulse was.
Yeah. Yeah. He's kind of, He's hard to parse out, either version of him.
Yeah.
He's a little hard to parse out, like what's actually going on in his brain, which is a good thing. I like that he's kind of weird and ambiguous all the time.
Yeah.
Either way.
And even Peliquin, who wanted to eat Boone, you see him happy at Boone's initiation to welcome him in, and it's the relationships and the changing of the dynamics and this definition of monstrous is really fascinating, the way they portray it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting to me that anybody would not be sympathetic to the creatures, the monsters, the Nightbreed, whether it's the book or the movie. And it's funny to me that the studio, I mean, it's not funny, I get it, because studio execs are, whatever. But
do they even like movies?
I'm so confused. Like movies? Like dead ass. Do they even like movies? Yeah, I mean, it's just funny to think that anybody would not feel sympathetic towards them, but I guess that's kind of the point of the story, right? Is that even just looking different or being a little different, can automatically shift people's perspective of who you are to them.
That's so awesome. His art became the thing he was arting about.
Literally, like, way to miss the point, guys. Oh man. Yeah.
So, were there any? There's like we went through the plot real fast, but were there themes that you were hoping to talk about that we have not gotten to yet?
Gosh, I mean, we hit a lot of the key points, I feel like.
I think so too.
Yeah, I would say, like, especially if people are new to Clive Barker, and especially if you're an occultist, you're a witch, you're a sorcerer, check this little story out. It's really short, but it's just packed with so much cool stuff in it. My personal favorite of any of Clive's works, I like Books of Blood, Volume 1, and my favorite story is In the Hills, the Cities, which is also really strange and esoteric. But all of his work is like that. It always has some sort of undercurrent of something more. And I don't know, it just really gets you thinking. And his prose is beautiful. I mean, even it's funny because this story actually is slightly simpler prose, I feel like, than a lot of his other stuff, especially some of the Books of Blood stuff is very kind of flowery and strange and poetic, which I love. But it's interesting because he manages to get that in with this short story, even though it is a slightly simpler prose style. So I guess that just speaks to him being a master of his craft. But I wish somebody would pick this up as a TV series and kind of follow the book more closely.
It might happen.
That would be cool.
Yeah, it might happen. Yeah, the novella is definitely an exercise in brevity on his part, which is pretty awesome. Fun fact. Did you happen to come across the fact that the quotes at the beginning of each chapter are fake? He wrote those as well.
Did he?
Yeah.
Okay.
How hilarious is that?
That's so funny. The one that another one that I took a picture of that I really loved was No Sword Shall Touch You Unless It Be Mine. And he attributes that to Anonymous Lover's Oath. And I was like, I need to look into that because that's a really cool quote. And I think that comes right before they break out Boone from the jail. But I don't know. I really love that. No sword shall touch you unless it be mine. But no, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
That sounds like an amazing protection spell.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
He knows what's up. He knows what he's doing.
You brought up in the beginning some of the elements of like traditional witchcraft and witchcraft houses that are in the story. I think we like barely even scratched the surface of that. I was definitely picking up on some of that as well, especially the union, the Chumbly style union with the god and just how it transforms you. The initiation scenes, but yeah, I think we've been talking a really long time.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, it feels like it went by fast.
It did.
Somebody could probably read the book in as long as we've been talking about it. But I mean, but that's why I was so excited to talk about. I mean, I could go off for hours on any of his works that I've read. I think I've read most of them. But this one is just especially really good for, the sort of sorceress witchy aspects of it. I'm surprised it's not talked about more. I know that people talk about Nightbreed, but you don't really see the story talked about as much, I feel like.
No, it is one of his, I think, lesser well-known ones. What do you have coming up that you would like to tell people about?
Well, I'm still doing, teaching, and I'm doing readings and, spell work and all that good stuff. So for people, if they want to find me, my website is roseauroras.com. I'm also at Rose Auroras on Instagram. That's where I kind of post stuff that I'm doing that's coming up. I don't have any like group classes or anything coming up right now, but I'm still teaching one-on-one. So I teach scrying and, trolldom, the magical arts in general. I do readings for people. My specialty is kind of, and what people kind of know me for, is if people have issues with fairies, elves, trolls, things like that. But any sort of readings, I actually really like doing readings about, kind of the mundane stuff too, like love and, work and all that kind of good stuff too. So happy to do that as well. If people want my services, you can email me through my website or hit me up on Instagram. And yeah, happy to oblige.
Great. I'll have your Instagram linked on all the show notes. And thank you so much for agreeing to do this. This was so fun.
Thank you. It was so much fun. And it was so fun to revisit both the book and the movie again, because again, it's been a while.
Yeah, for me too.
So I'm so glad that you asked me to do this, and I really appreciate you. And I love that you have this platform too, to kind of talk about the magic in literature. And it's just, I don't know, it's really needed, I think. So hopefully this will inspire people, do something cool with your magic and find that transformation within them,
Visit the cemeteries at night.
Yeah, hit it up. Find the Nightbreed.
Until we meet again, may all your travels be filled with wonder.